Do GCSE results prove that it's unfair to send your kids to a private school? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Please do give us a call. The reason we're doing this, of course, is GCSE grades. They've dropped slightly across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, with the share of kids awarded a grade 7 and above now at 21.8%. More importantly, I suppose, or interestingly, the gap between private and state schools has also risen. Private schools are now 29 percentage points ahead of comprehensives when it comes to how many pupils were awarded top grades. Kids at independent schools also outperformed their state school peers in last week's A-level results by the biggest margin on record. OK, so full disclosure, here we are. I'm going to say state school, Lin Mei?
Both.
A bit of both?
Yeah.
OK. Primary, secondary?
So I was homeschooled initially, and then I went to a private school.
Yeah.
I think I was about maybe 11, went to private school for about a year and a half. Then I went to a state school, but it was private up until the year that I went. So it still felt like a private school, but then it became grant maintained.
OK, Ben, how about yourself?
I went to a comprehensive and then went to a state sixth form college for A-level. OK,
so I went to private schools throughout. So there we are. We've got a real range between us of experiences. What do you think, Ben? Does this prove that actually state schools are at a disadvantage and there is a two-tier system operating in our... Well, we know there is, because otherwise parents wouldn't pay for it.
Of course there, exactly that. We wouldn't have people paying tens of thousands in some cases in fees every single year if there wasn't an advantage. And yes, I do think it's an unfair advantage, because I believe in a country where a young person's prospects in life are determined by two things, really: their talents and their abilities and how hard they are willing to work. And right now we live in a country where, even more than either of those two things, a child's life prospects are determined by how much money their parents have in the bank. Now, you're not going to be able to remove that. You're always going to have parents that can do holidays and theatre trips and books and so on more than others. That's inevitable. But you can limit the amount that money can buy educational privilege. And you can't do that with a system that has private schools able to have half the number of pupils per class that state schools do, able to pay teachers more, able to have incredible facilities that state schools just don't have. It is fundamentally an unfair system.
I mean, Lin Mei, you've experienced both sides of the coin, I suppose. Could you feel the difference when you moved to a private system?
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think there's this misconception that private schools is only for, like, the reason why you want to send your children. I'm not saying it's never the case, but, you know, elitism, where there are some fantastic private schools that accommodate children that state schools just can't do that, whether it's based on funding, disability. And this is the thing, that when it comes to the 20% VAT, there are so many children that they cannot go to state school, or if they do and are forced to go, they're not going to have the facilities for those who have, you know, special requirements, special needs,
Is that the vast majority of those?
I mean, maybe not the vast majority.
We could find those schools that cater for, let's say, special educational needs, and we could look at them. But separately, most parents, I would say, who send their kids to private school, is because they want the best for them. They want them to get better results in the way that we've seen.
But what's wrong with that? I think we live in a society, especially in the West, where you can benefit from social mobility. You can improve in one generation your life. And why would you then stifle parents' ability who maybe didn't have the opportunity when they were children? Now they have that opportunity. And this whole idea, yes, we should strive for equality, but the reality is humans need to accept life is not fair. If we start this control of let's eradicate private schools, let's get rid of first class, let's get rid of people who don't, you know, who have cars, because some people don't have cars. Let's get rid of Waitrose and M&S, because some people can't afford to buy in those stores. Where do we stop with this? Because it's not fair. What should be happening is state schools should be better funded. If we look at the divide between the North and the South, children in state schools in the South receive over 1,000 more per child that they don't in the North. That's not...
OK.
But that's exactly what the government is doing, and it's raising the money by putting VAT on private school fees in order to better fund the state school sector. So you take from the parents of the 7% and you give to the 93%, and people still argue that's unfair.
It's not going to raise the amount, firstly, because...
It's raising £2.5 billion.
But that's not going to be enough, because what's going to happen is, and when Labour was pushed on this, pressed on this multiple occasions in interviews. How are you going to facilitate all of those who just about afford to send their children and now there's going to be an influx of them going to state school, which we already know is massively overcrowded? They have no answer how they're going to get more teachers, because that £2 billion is not going to be enough, more teachers and more spaces, which means bigger facilities, bigger classrooms. That's not going to be viable.
OK, I want to take as many calls as we can. Annie's in Oxfordshire. Do these GCSE results and the A-level results, Annie, demonstrate that there is an unfairness built into our education system?
I don't think it's unfair. I think that's the choice of the parents. But what the parents also do is back the children up with their education and help them with their homework, allow them to express themselves. So it's not just a school, it's the parents that are involved too.
OK, but it is a little bit unrealistic to say, well, that parents who send their kids to state schools don't back them educationally. There's plenty of parents who want the best for their kids, who support them. Just because they go to state school, that doesn't mean that the parents are negligent in some way, does it?
No, absolutely not. All I'm saying, because of the results, it shows you a percentage that they do better in private schools, but that is partly due to the parents.
OK.
You know,
What do we do then?
Hours into their children.
What do we do then, Annie, to get, as you know, we aim for equality, as Lynn says. What do we do to redress this balance so that state school kids have as good a chance as private school kids?
Well, the government has to supply a better state education with less people in the classes. Yes, they've got to build more schools, but they could do it that way and increase the likelihood of better results if they've got more schools and less pupils in the classroom and more teachers.
Do you accept that this is the truth of life? This is just the way that we are, that those who have more resources, more money, will get better things for their kids?
Well, to a certain extent, but I know many people who have given up, want to get their children into private school and work two jobs, 3 jobs, whatever, because that's what they want. They too give up a lot to get their child into a private school. OK, there's always the elite in the world. You're never going to stop that, and they just pay. But it's not all like that.
OK, thank you so much, Anne. We're going to take another call. Peter's in Cheshire. Peter, is that what these grades tell us, that there is this massive inequality built into our education system, in society, when our kids are just starting out?
Yes, I do believe that. Yes, I do believe it. And I think that there is a number of facts that show us this. We're not talking about a level playing field. Forget the money side of it. We're not talking about an educational level playing field when we look at private and state education. If I can give you a couple of examples. Private schools do not have to follow rigidly the national curriculum. Their flexibility, they can put other subjects in, take subjects out. They don't have to follow the state GCSE exams. They can take the IGCSE, which a Conservative MP in 2019 at the Education Committee had not admitted. He stated that he believed that exam was easier, was a bit simpler, was a bit more manageable. So
Labour's answer to this is effectively to tax private schools, and then it says redirect that finance towards state schools. Is that going to redress the inequality, even partially, do you think?
No. It's a starting point. It's a starting point. What I would like them to do is bring the private schools into the state education rule system. So they have to follow all the rules that a state education has to follow, private schools do, in terms of exams, curriculum, and things they have to supply. If they were to do that in a year or two, we could make a judgment. Okay. Is it as good? But if you're stacking, if you're saying to 2 teams, we'll just say 2 teams of football, right, guys, on your side, you have to follow all the rules. Right, Team B, don't worry about offside. You just go and play.
It's a good point,
It's not
Peter.
fair, is it?
Thank you, Peter. I just wonder, Ben, if we're actually missing one of the most important components here, which is class size. Because if we're talking about curriculum and the freedom that private schools have, that's one thing. But if you're teaching to 12 kids instead of 30, that's got to be a really important part of the equation.
I think it's almost the number one thing. The average number of students in a private school classroom, 16. The average in the state school, secondary school, 27. And that means that any people at a school like mine who needed a bit of extra support, needed extra pushing perhaps because they were doing better than the rest, they didn't get it. You have to teach the majority. And if you're struggling or if you're doing well, you kind of get forgotten about because teachers just don't have the time. Just wanted to make one other point based on what that caller was saying, which is just rightly to challenge this idea that private is good and state is bad. Another reason that private schools get better results is because most of them are highly selective. They take the most talented or able students. No great surprise they get better results then. When you look at selective state schools, when you look at grammar schools, they outperform even private schools. So there are some state schools who are also taking talented pupils doing amazing things. I sort of don't like this idea that state schools are all bad and private schools are all good.